Well, welcome to Walking in Worship. My name is Dan Shields. I'm a worship pastor at Orchard Hill Church, and I'm here with David Bowens, who's also on part of the worship team with us. And we have Colleen and Ayhan Ulke joining us, who are longtime team members and leaders here and old friends of mine as well. So we're excited for the conversation today. So we're going to jump in. We're going to start off just getting a little background with Ayhan and Colleen. So I wanted to ask you guys just a little bit of where you came from, both spiritually and your personal life. And maybe I'll start with you, Colleen. Maybe you could give a little background on, how you grew up, the sort of spiritual environment that you were in, your sort of perspectives on, God as a young woman, and just a little bit of your background.
Okay, that's a lot, but I'll start with, I grew up in a Christian home. My dad is a pastor, still is a pastor. 7 kids, so 6 girls, 1 boy. And we were in the church all the time. I mean, we grew up Baptist. Our services were usually 2 to 3 hours long on a Sunday.
A little different than Orchard Hill.
A little different than Orchard Hill. And it was all about, how the Spirit moved you and how many songs the choir sang. It was like 2, 3, 4, 5 songs, and
So would they sing stuff that was not rehearsed and stuff and just...
Well, they always had something. It was like always an A and B selection. That's how it was described. There's an A and B selection by the choir, but there were usually several of those. But that would always prolong the service too.
Yes.
But then we'd always have Wednesday nights, of course, but often it was also like a lot of revivals. So it could be like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Sunday.
And what was that all about? What were the revivals
my gosh.
about?
Revivals were, I hate to say like this kind of judgmental, hyper spiritual thing, but it was more about the experience of God, which is great, which is a good thing. But sometimes it was like, the church needs to come back to this kind of feeling, this experience, sometimes more than the teaching that we were getting.
Mm-hmm.
There are also some great revivals where it was really just great teaching.
Yeah.
And we came away with some great teaching. Sometimes it was casting out demons.
Mm-hmm.
We had those kinds of services too, like all of that stuff that we were exposed to as children. That was like, wow, like this is what Christianity is, It was a lot more about experience at that point.
Well, let me ask you something, because that's kind of interesting. We have a church here where I think, a lot of people, especially people who were not used to these types of churches, who come from more traditional churches, they'll come in and say like, I really sensed and felt God in the service. And I believe them,
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's true. And David and I both came from experiences where there's experiential churches also, where some of it was, that what you'd say hyper spirituality, like I don't want to say a fake emotionalism, but you might experience things that don't really actually change and transform your life and make you into a deeper disciple of Christ necessarily, but you experience this great feeling. Did you at times, though, feel, looking back on it now with your 2020 hindsight with where you're at now, do you think you actually did encounter God at times in real ways, though, in those services?
Absolutely. I firmly believe that God meets us where we are. I also believe he doesn't want us to stay where we are, but I believe in his grace. He will come to that place where like we need something, like, Lord, I need this sign. I need this, something. I need you to show me something so that I know you're real, or this is true, or I know what the next step is. And I really don't think that's his perfect will, but I think in his grace, he says, I'm going to meet you where you are because of your heart toward me. I believe your heart toward me is good and pure.
Yes.
And your intentions are good. So I think many people experience God in those situations, but then they didn't know how to grow past that.
Totally. Yeah. I think like I would say the same as you, not that I didn't see things that I was skeptical of. I did, but oftentimes, and maybe more times than the other side, I really did feel like I was experiencing God in a very, very real, visceral way that, and if you think about it, if God really is our Father in heaven and we're really his children, when you have little kids, my daughter sometimes will say like, I just need to snuggle, or I see it especially with her and my wife, like she just needs that like touch and comfort of, or with me, it's more like, she wants to talk, and there needs to be, but it's that connection point,
Yeah.
And if it's if God's real, and he really has a real personality, and he really is our Father and really cares for us, wouldn't that be reasonable if we came into, if we said, like, I just need your touch, for him to say, come on, sit on my lap.
Yeah.
I mean,
I just read a
think it's
book
good and
that
real.
was talking about that, where they were describing a father and son walking along each other, or along with each other. And he recognizes, like, well, that is his son and that is his father. But when the father scooped up the son and like hugged
Yes.
him and threw him in the air, and like, you saw the relationship, and the son had the experience of being his father's son,
Yes.
and that's what you just said. It's like, yeah, we know we're God's children, but sometimes we need that snuggle.
Well, I love that picture.
know?
I can remember once we were going up to Niagara Falls, and we had to cross the border. And this was right after they instituted that you needed a passport. And Jesse didn't have a passport. And I didn't even think about it because, before you could just go across the
Yeah.
border,
Yeah.
But they were worried, of course, about trafficking and stuff like that,
Mhm.
somebody stealing a kid. So we got there, and they weren't going to let us through. And they made us sit in this room. It was a very like tense, uncomfortable situation, because you knew that they were like watching you. But we probably sat in this room for maybe an hour. And I know, looking back now, what they were doing. They
Seeing how
were
you
watching
related.
us. Yeah, they were watching us on camera and seeing, if I'm like scolding him or something
Sure.
like that, or if like, he's sitting on my lap and there's something that you see with that interaction where you see
Right.
like, that is that guy's child.
Right.
Mhm.
And, it makes sense that as Christians, people should be able to spot that we are the children of our Father, right?
Yes.
So,
Mhm.
well, I got you sidetracked though on that. So tell us a little bit
That's
more.
okay.
So 7 kids, pastor's home.
Yeah.
And then where did things go from there? I mean, how did your spiritual life develop and change from there?
Well, I mean, we had a great family, but I remember always saying to myself, I will never marry a pastor, because I mean, it's like he had a whole other flock to take care of.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
hard.
not like we were neglected, or, but it was
Yeah.
like there was that tug of war, like, who's first? Who's going to take care of first?
Yes.
And we all sang together. So
You were an extension of the church as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
but at
Mhm.
times as kids, we felt like just like this like showpiece. Come on, girls, come up and sing for us,
Yeah.
But we didn't feel as like we were being,
Yeah,
I
sure.
don't
know
know.
exactly what you feel.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly what you feel. Yeah.
I don't even want to say like he didn't nurture us.
No,
He
he
did.
did.
But he had
A
to
great
do
father.
it to 2 different families,
Mhm.
really.
Yeah.
So that made it more
Yeah.
challenging. So that was one thing. But I also, and I love my father. I mean, he is
He's a great man.
so gracious and so giving, and just took care of everyone.
Selfless.
Yeah, selfless. But I remember really recognizing God as my father because of where there was lack with my earthly father.
Oh, wow.
It was so easy for me, like, yes. So
Yes.
he knows me through and through. I can spend time with him, one-on-one. Like, he's just mine.
Yes.
Even though he's not just mine, but that
Yeah,
was the
right,
experience I had. And so
Oh, that's
if I
cool.
was afraid, and when I was younger, I was afraid of the dark, and I would have like a flashlight under my pillow and my Bible under my pillow. And if I couldn't sleep and I was nervous about something, I would wake up and read scripture.
Hmm.
And so I knew that's where my source of strength came from.
Mm.
And that's what soothed me.
Mm.
So I was able to keep that all the way up through high school, college. I went to a Christian school also,
Yeah.
very involved in youth groups. So that, I think that made it easier too, that I
Sure.
was never, pulled in any other directions.
All right. And then you go off to college. Where'd you go to college? How
Grove
was that
City-
experience?
Grove City College.
Yep.
It was good. If you're going to get into like racial stuff, like I grew up from a young age in a mostly Black community.
Okay.
4th grade, we moved to a white neighborhood, went to this Christian school that was mostly white. Like, I think there
Yeah.
were 3 of us in the whole school. And that, of course, formed some of my, beliefs and thinking
Mhm.
about things. And then my dad said, you have to go to Grove City College. I think it's the only college I applied to, because he's like, you have to go there.
Really?
Okay. Because it's Christian, it's close, and it's
Yes.
affordable. So
Yeah, that's-
that's where I went. And
I have a kid who's getting ready for college. That all sounds good to me.
Yes. And
Pretty
it was,
good.
and I had a good experience. But I had more of that kind of like this, you know, it was me, maybe one other guy, maybe three people again in a whole school that were Black.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that, again, like, okay, that was my world. And then we moved here to Wexford, and that's pretty much, we moved other places, but end up here in Wexford. But great experience at Grim City, great experience in Wexford at Orchard Hill.
Cool. So, Ayhan, you grew up in a home that has a very interesting backstory. Can you walk us through a little bit of that?
You started up with her, so now I'm going to give you the flip side.
Right.
You know where they came up with that other side of the tracks?
Right.
No, I came from a family that was stable, well off. My father immigrated here when he was 20, 21 from Turkey. He was on a full scholarship to the United States, and scientist, mechanical engineer, had a PhD. I was with him when he kind of learned those things. I got those advanced degrees. He married my mother, who was Irish Catholic out of North Dakota, is like we like to say. Total opposites, which we can relate to. And he learned English, when he came here. Wow. And I was born in this country. And I think when I was about 3 years old, went back to Turkey with my father because he was serving a mandatory time in the Turkish Marines. That was mandatory. You didn't volunteer. You had to do your 2 years, even after he had done his schooling in the United States. So went back, and I almost didn't leave Turkey. In fact, we had this conversation, just my father and I, the other day, and he was saying, you almost didn't grow up a Christian, which was an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
But so he thinks, and I countered that. I believe I would have grown up a Christian because I believe that, God knows me from conception, but that's another aside. But my dad is I would call him a non-practicing Muslim. I believe he is a believer in God, but he is very scientifically driven. So there are things that, whether it's politically, whether it's spiritually, we gloss over, we talk about. I mean, I've shared with him throughout my life many things about the gospel. I think I've shared the gospel in 12 different ways over the years. Some have been met openly, and he's attended Orchard Hill. He's been here before in the past, but I think over time it became a very cultural thing with him where he, I'm telling you about my dad, but my dad's a great guy, very similar to Colleen's father in the fact that selfless, giving, just a fantastic role model as far as, the kind of person that you'd want to grow up or have your kids grow up to be like. At the same time, some of the deepest things in my life as a Christian, I was raised by my mother my mother was already practicing her Christianity, and we went to a Church of Christ, a non-denominational Church of Christ in Monroeville. For years, I think I was accepted the gospel, received the gospel when I was 12 years old.
Wow.
And remember leading hymns in this small church in Monroeville at a young age, just being part of that experience and wanting to be part of it. Got baptized when I was 12. My father didn't object. He just said, hey, I think at one point he said when I was about 16, which is later, he said, if you ever want to know what I grew up with, and he didn't say what I believe, what I grew up with, he handed me a Quran. And that was the extent of it, really. I mean, and I did my own research. I did my own study of what the Quran was about and Muhammad's experience. And it was not something that I think my dad ever held against me, but I think he knew coming to this country, just like learning English, it was almost, even though we're not everybody's a Christian in this nation, I think at the time when he came, he felt that it was up to me. It was my freedom. It was something that he wasn't going to stand in the way of. And my mother was more, I should say, she was more determined, to get us to church. And my brothers and I was the oldest of three boys. I'm sorry, oldest of four boys. I don't want to leave my youngest brother. But he, so four boys growing up with my mother and my father in our family. And
So your mom was outnumbered?
She was outnumbered a lot of times. There's a lot of stories there. We still reminisce over those. But
yeah.
That's pretty much the experience for me growing up. But I can definitely say I definitely had that early Christian experience, but then I think I moved away from it, let's just say, in my teenage years and in my early point in my college years. And I think it took a situation in a breakup in my life that brought me to pretty much realizing that, man, all that stuff that I learned as a believer when I was really young, it matters now. It brought me back to what was really important. And I think I needed that experience looking back on it. It was a really tough time in my life in my early 20s. But
man, I was just talking to Lydia about that, my wife, and just saying, how God will allow us to go through things to grow our character in certain ways and draw us towards Him in certain ways. Man, I mean, you can really see that in your life in general, can't you? Looking back, like
Absolutely.
how God brought you through challenging stuff. So, hey, and fun fact, Ayhan and I went to elementary school together.
Yeah.
Back in the 20th century.
Well, I was just getting to that in the fact that, during that tough time, we knew each other as kids, but we weren't fast friends. We knew each other. We were at different parts in the district, like different areas of the district, probably farther away from each other.
We knew each other because I worked at a music store that he was always at, because he was in a popular band and was always there. So, and we had the same guitar teacher, which was
interesting.
Interesting.
You actually learned something, but
Not true.
The difference being I think that the important thing is that it was at that timing when I was really humbled, had to go back home. I was living on my own and then had to go back home after this breakup, and was at the bottom, I think, of where I was. And God started to, I felt like I had lost all my friends, because when you're in a breakup, those people have to be, you can't necessarily be the same kind of friend with those people. So I felt like very alone. And I remember God just bringing people out of the woodwork. And Dan Shields was one of the people that was brought out of the woodwork in my life. And that was really important, because I think we both were going through kind of I don't want to get, hyper spiritual and call it sanctification, but it was definitely a part where our faith was becoming more focused in our lives at the same time. And I owe debt of gratitude for that friendship that really burgeoned at that point in my 20s.
Yeah, because I was, you had been a Christian at that point for 10 years, even though, you hadn't walked through it, through your late teens and stuff. But for me, it was all brand new. I mean, I had just become a Christian. So, it meant a lot to me as well. So.
That was powerful.
Yeah. Well, why don't we jump into a little bit of the book stuff? We'll talk through some of the ideas in the book.
Well, we're married, by the way. I don't know. You did catch that. I thought I'd throw it in. I mean,
that's why you guys are sitting so close.
Well, right.
I get it.
We were married 26 years.
Wow.
And it's somewhat of a milestone, I think.
All right. Another fun fact.
Pretty amazing.
I was there when they got engaged.
That was going to come up. Yes.
I was there when they got engaged. You were there when we met. And I was there when they met.
Wow.
You're right.
Interesting
and
stuff.
I was there on their honeymoon.
That was awkward.
Not true. Not true at all.